Oh, are they? Okay.
At which we'll talk about the maps, so almost certainly revise the maps and go through a lot more detail as you'd expect looking at the nuts and bolts of those maps before you adopt a map. It's worth noting that this is an unusual process for two reasons. Number one, the board's decision is not the final decision. Once the board adopts its preferred map, then the map goes to part of the county, which is called the County Committee on School District Organization. And they will come, well, nowadays they do them virtually, but traditionally they come to the district and hold a hearing, and then they have the final say on the details of the map. And it's unusual for a second reason, which is thanks to a quirk in California law. I know you'll all be shocked to hear that there are weird provisions of the Ed Code, but this is one of those provisions. We have to go through this process now because of the challenge that's come in, even though the census is going on as we speak. Hopefully you're all well aware of that. And that data will come out next year. So the idea is we'll draw maps this year and then hopefully just fine tune them after the census data comes out next year. It's worth noting that after the census, the only requirement is one hearing. Obviously, the board can hold more hearings, do whatever process it wishes to do, but you're not as locked in as you are in this process. So this is important for the public who's listening to understand. We're drawing the maps now because state law says we have to. This November's election will still be the traditional at-large approach. So you'll still have your district-wide election. It'll still be just like your past elections have been. The election system won't change until the 2022 election. So in this year, you'll elect 2 trustees in the traditional way. And then in 2022, 3 of the trustee areas will hold an election. And then in 2024, the remaining 2 trustee areas will hold their first election. So it's a gradual process, but it is important for the voters to know the reason we're doing this now is because the state requires it. But this year's election will be a traditional district-wide election. So this brings us to the rules of how we draw these lines. And there are a few requirements. The absolute requirements are set in federal law. Number one, and these are the same that the city went through for those that followed the city process, it's worth noting. Number one, each trustee area has to have essentially an equal number of people. And it is people. It's not students, it's not registered voters, it's human beings actually counted in the last census. So each trustee area needs to be within a couple of percent of that ideal. And then we have to follow the Federal Voting Rights Act, which says if we have a pocket of people, really a neighborhood, who are what the law calls a protected class, so Latino, Asian American, African American, or Native American, then we can't divide that neighborhood in a way that dilutes their voting strength. No surprise, it's pretty straightforward. But at the same time, race is not our predominant consideration. We can't do what's called racial gerrymandering, where we purely base the lines on race. As I noted before, it's which neighborhoods have a concentration of one of those protected classes. So we are still focusing on neighborhoods. And that's where the decisions start to come in. So we have really, those are the only requirements: equal population, follow the Federal Voting Rights Act, and no racial gerrymandering. Where all the decisions come down is on the community of interest and what we call the traditional redistricting principles. And these are goals. There's no map. I can't give you a map and say this one's the best, adopt it. This is all choices and trade-offs between communities of interest, trying to be compact and contiguous, and trying to follow visible features so that it's easy for the voters to understand where the lines go. And then one thing that is allowed, it's not a requirement, but it is allowed, is looking at the current board members and where they live and trying to avoid pairing them. And that often raises questions. What we really look at that is, let the voters decide which board members have earned re-election. If each board member ends up in a separate seat, well then that board member gets to run. The voters get to choose whether or not to re-elect them or not. If we draw a map that puts multiple board members in one seat, it doesn't matter what the voters think. If they want to re-elect both, they can't. They have to choose one. So that is, again, not a requirement, but it is a traditional redistricting principle that the courts have said is perfectly fine. And then the other factor we can look at is future growth. You can slightly underpopulate a seat if you think it's going to grow more. We probably won't look at that much this time around. It'll be more consideration when we get the new census data. We have a sense of what's happened in the last 10 years and can look ahead to the next 10 years. But that is something worth mentioning. So in the school district, it's worth noting there are, as the board members probably know, but those listening may not, the school district boundaries are slightly different than the city boundaries. The two don't quite correspond, so the numbers are a little bit different. So we do have 145,000 people, just over 145,000 people in the school district according to the last census. So each district essentially needs to have 1/5 of that number. We will generate those reports. We'll also generate data on citizens of voting age, which is your eligible voters. So for every trustee area and every map, you'll be able to see where's the Latino voting strength, where's the Asian American voting strength, where's the African American voting strength, and so on. But that's not all we generate. Obviously, there are a lot of factors that come into play when you're looking at communities of interest. So we'll give you data on renters versus homeowners, households with children in them, age breakdowns, and all kinds of demographic data when you have a map. In terms of looking at the Voting Rights Act and where the lines might be limited, most of your protected classes are fairly well spread out. So you do have a slight concentration of Latino population up towards the north, kind of along the freeway as it cuts through the city and the school district. But that's really the only very clear pocket that we need to be aware of for Latinos. Asian Americans actually are concentrated more or less in the rest of the north. It's an interesting dichotomy. And then in the center of the city around, I think it's Charles Wilson Community Park. There's definitely an Asian American concentration there. So those are the two areas we'll have to be sure. Not that we have to put those two Asian American concentrations together, but we have to be sure that we don't divide up either one of them in a way that dilutes their voting strength. And then as you look at maps, you and the community will be able to weigh in on whether you think the maps that put them together make sense, or if the maps that don't have them in the same seat make more sense. But those are the kind of ethnic Voting Rights Act communities of interest. One thing we want to do in this process is hear from you and on the board and the residents on what they think are the other communities of interest. Obviously, it can be anything. We always say a neighborhood is defined as whatever the people who live in that neighborhood think it is. So it can be an area around a park, it can be an area around a school. The big one for school districts almost always is your school attendance areas. But there's a big second question on this. So number one, most people probably identify with their elementary school and the middle school that feeds into and the high school that feeds into. And people's first instinct and kind of traditional redistricting would be, let's keep that attendance zone together, unite the neighborhood. And some jurisdictions do that, and that's fine. It gives them, it maximizes their voting strength to elect the board member they want. But most school districts actually don't do that. They take another approach, and neither one of these is right or wrong. They're just two options, which is to try to make sure that every attendance zone has multiple board members. It can lead to some odd, stretched out looking lines. But what that does is it kind of balances out the tendency to balkanize the district. We have some great, nice, good-looking maps that we've drawn for jurisdictions, but then board members start feeling like, this is my school, that's your school, we're going to fight over who gets what. If we do divide up the attendance zones, well, then each board member has 2 or 3 or 4 schools in their trustee area, so they're accountable to multiple groups of parents. And each school has 2 or 3 board members that it can go to. And this is where I always remind the public that don't get confused by the county. You know, the county supervisors, they really run their district. They're kind of the king, and nowadays in LA, the queens of the county, and they run it almost with sole authority. As you may have seen in the city since they made the change, that doesn't happen in the city. It still takes a majority vote to do anything. And so often PTAs and other neighborhood groups will actually want multiple board members who are elected from their area and have to campaign and knock on doors in their area. So that gives them 2 or even 3 voices on the board. So that is a big choice and a big challenge that we'll face as we go through this process of, do you like maps that are more compact, probably look nicer, and that unite neighborhoods, or do you want to go the other way and ensure that multiple trustees represent each school zone and that each trustee represents multiple schools? And so you can give us direction on that early on, or we can come back to you with draft maps that show you both options and decide that when you're looking at the draft maps. So one thing that always comes up is, can we just use the city's map? You can't, number one, because the population numbers are a little bit different, but number two, because the city has 6 districts. There are 6 council districts electing plus the at-large mayor for the 7th member. So because the numbers are different, the breakdown has to be different. So we can look at the decisions that are embodied in that map and perhaps follow the lines here and there so it's easier for the voters. But we can't adopt their map. Your map will be significantly different. If for no other reason, then it will only have 5 seats. And then finally, one of the questions in addition to each attendance zone I have is that you have this, I found very handy information on your district website about the feeder system and how the elementary schools feed in the middle schools and feed in the high schools. So that too is a question of, do you want to try to keep those together, especially if we're going for the more compact maps? Or is it more, maybe what some jurisdictions do is they keep each elementary school together, so each elementary school has 1 board member, but then they mix it up at the middle school and high school level. Because there are fewer schools, the areas involved are larger, it's a little easier to mix it up. So these are all options that we're happy to take feedback from the public today and from the board if you have it today, or at the next hearing. As I mentioned, we'll essentially have the same hearing one more time. And of course, people are always free to contact the district and share their thoughts once they've had some time to think about these questions as well. So I'm happy to take any questions you have or hear from the public and answer any questions after that. Thank you, and it's good to be with you, even if virtually.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson, for your comments and remarks here. Are there any questions amongst board members for Dr. Johnson this evening?
Terry?
Yes, Mr. Lee.
Yeah, Dr. Johnson. I kind of played with your old, we're not going to do it because we don't have as much money as the city, but the interactive map that you had done for the city. And it's kind of a fun exercise, even though I don't have the doctorate. But I think I'm a proponent personally of the trustees having more than 1 high school attendance area. They're probably going to anyway, because there's 5 of us and 4 high schools, so they're going to overlap one way or the other. But I think to the extent that we can get at least 2 high schools in each one of the districts would be perfect. Also, keeping the existing board members in separate districts, I think, is preferable for the reasons you brought up. You know, they elected these people. They want to have that choice going forward. And if we put them in the same district, we're going to take away that choice from them. I know there was a problem with the city that you didn't know because the election happened after the district, but you ended up with 2 incumbents running against each other, and that was rather uncomfortable. Also, the other thing is, I guess, to the extent that we need to time these district elections so they coincide with the existing terms of the existing members, right, Dr. Johnson? So I would assume that whatever districts that Mrs. Liu, Mr. Hahn, and Dr. Gerson end up in the cycle in 2022, and then the 2, whatever is left over, ends up in the district that Mrs. Reagan's and myself are in. That's really all I wanted to say. I know I brought up among the group, the board members informally, and this is not in Dr. Johnson's wheelhouse, is that we probably need to talk to our council over whether we want district elections that require 50% plus 1 to be elected, or do we just want to leave it as whoever gets the most votes get elected. I know that's the way the city has it. I'm kind of preferable to 50% plus 1, but that's not Dr. Johnson's wheelhouse, I don't think, and we'll need to talk to our council on how that is dealt with the ed code and everything else that goes forward, correct?
Yeah, actually, that is something that comes up a lot. We do deal with that a lot, and are happy to help you with that. But as you say, these are two very complicated questions. I would get through this first, and
Right.
then that. Yes.
Yeah, and plus we have time because the election that will be affected is 2022, which is more than a couple of years away. So we've got time to cross that bridge. So yeah, today or over the next, 6 weeks in this process, that deal with lines and districts, and then we can play with the 50% one issue when that's over with. Thank you, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Any other board member comments at this point?
Good, we'll see you in a couple.
I guess that's it then. Are there any interested persons in the audience, or do we have any emails to be read about this in any way? Okay. Well, I will close this public hearing for today and announce a second public hearing to be held at the board meeting scheduled for August 17th, 2020 at 7:00 p.m. So join us for that if you want to be part of the subsequent discussion. And I think we'll see Dr. Johnson again then.
You will indeed. Thank you very
All
much.
right. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, so that takes care of that public hearing. We will move on to our oral communications or unscheduled hearings of non-agenda items. The Board of Education does welcome input from the public, and in order to discuss district business in an orderly manner and for the privacy and safety of the speakers, we actually don't have speakers this evening. We are following the procedure that Dr. Stowe actually read at the beginning of the meeting, which is having individuals write to us at superintendent@TUSD.org. Prior to taking those comments, though, I do want to say that this evening we will be looking at our instructional models for the school district, and any of the comments that are related to those particular agenda items that people sent to us will actually be read along with those agenda items. The other things that were non-agendized will be considered in this section. And I will turn it over to Dr. Stowe to begin that process.
Thank you, Mrs. Reagans and board members. I wanted to share that I received probably 70 or 80 emails in the past 24 hours regarding what I believe the individuals assumed was the agenda item for tonight on the discussion action item, and that's 11.3, 4, and 5 on the instructional models for schools. Most of the emails that I received, and I responded to as many as I could up until about 6 p.m. today. Most of them were in relation to health and safety concerns around the physical reopening of school. Understandably, there's a lot of information in the news. And so I have a number of individuals responded back saying not to read theirs publicly. I do probably have 30 or 35 emails that either I didn't hear back from folks, or they responded that they would like these read publicly. But again, because these are, and I've tried to sort out, there's only 2 or 3 that are related to item 11.3, 4, or 5. There are a couple that I have that I believe fall under the oral communications, but that are not related necessarily to health and safety. But I do have a group of, like I said, roughly 30 to 35 emails from individuals around the health and safety topic. So given that I have this many, I wanted to see what the board wanted me to do. As to typically, it's a 30-minute time limit for items that relate to any one particular topic. But just wanted to throw that out there to the board that reading all of these into the record might take an hour or so.
Okay, I do recognize that in our instructions for public comment, we usually do say that your presentation is limited to 3 minutes and time allotted for public input on non-agenda items is limited to 30 minutes. And that is generally the parameters that we apply to these unscheduled non-agenda items. So shall we go, let you start from the top and read down, and when 30 minutes runs out, we're done? Or do we want to give each member or each one of those 1 minute of time to be read? That would allow perhaps a little bit of exposure for each individual. Or since many of them are health and safety, shall we hold them for a subsequent meeting when we actually will be dealing with that topic as a discussion item? I'm open to the pleasure of the board. Are there comments?
I don't think we can hold them for a later meeting because they submitted them for this meeting, and that makes me uncomfortable to not read any of them.
Okay, so that's Mr. Gerson's comment. Anything beyond that, how to manage them, Mr. Gerson?
Oh, that's hard.
Yeah, it is hard.
I'd like to hear the others' opinions. I'd like to hear, I know that there's a lot of people on right now who are very interested in hearing the business, and I don't know how they feel about changing it to an hour and making them wait longer. That's my only concern, because I do want to hear them. And I'm not sure how many were just sent to Dr. Stowe and how many we've already read, because I've read at least 50 emails myself. So did you,
Yeah, agreed.
Dr. Stowe, of the ones that didn't respond to you on being read to the record, do you have any knowledge were any of them also sent to us? So that if we've already read them, then we know the contents and we could focus on the ones that were just sent to you first?
I am not aware if you received most of these because they were sent directly to the superintendent at TUSD.org email address. They may have been BCC'd or sent separately to board members individually.
I think we all got the same emails. I think for the most part, I think they all had a superintendent at TUSD.org on the extension of the CC. So I think we've all seen all the emails and read them and responded to some. You said there's, Dr. Stowe, there's 50 or 60?
I have printed out between 30 and 35.
You want to go a minute apiece, and at least everybody knows that we've acknowledged that we've read them and received them?
I think that if we were at a regular board meeting, you wouldn't give a person a minute. It would have been every person would have come up and probably use their 3 minutes. I think it should be based upon order, because that's how it would have been here if we were in person.
Okay, just to be the devil's advocate though, we actually have given shorter time periods if there have been a number of comments that we wanted to hear some portion of. But I'm open to either one, whichever the board prefers.
Yeah, we have in the past shortened it to get it to fit into roughly the 30-minute, window to allow everybody to speak. So it's not unprecedented, but I'll go with whatever the majority wants to go with.
Mr. Hahn's suggestion is good with me.
Which suggestion?
You said in the order received up into the 30 minutes, right, Mr. Hahn?
Hang on. He's conferring with the secretary. So Mr. Hahn, your suggestion was to just start reading in the order received and end at 30 minutes? with a 3-minute limit per, so if it goes over 3 minutes for a single individual, to limit that? Is that
That's fine
part
with
of
me.
your,
Yes. Uh-huh.
is that okay with you, Mrs. Liu, or there you are?
Yes, I am fine with any of them. That's fine.
Okay, so Dr. Stowe, we'll let you begin and give
Okay,
you
so
3 minutes per letter.
So I have 3 of them that are not necessarily directly related to health and safety. So I'll read those 3. The first one is from Lauren Cram. I was wondering if there are any plans for a second survey for teachers' opinions on returning, as was requested in the meeting last Tuesday. Thank you. This next one is from Julie Pinella. Dear Dr. Stowe and Torrance Unified Board members, my name is Julie Pinella, and I've taught at Walteria Elementary School for 23 years, my entire career. I know at tonight's board meeting, a decision will be most likely made as to how the school year will begin. I have one thought that I'd like the board to consider if it hasn't already. Since the COVID-19 numbers have been increasing in LA County, why doesn't the TUSD school board work with the Torrance Teachers Association to delay the new year to after Labor Day? This would give a bit more time for numbers to hopefully go down, more time to prepare for cleaning, sanitizing, etc., and give parents more time to decide what they would like to do. We've had only 1 year of a pre-Labor Day start. In my opinion, a calendar change would be a wise move. Thank you for your hard work and dedication to the TUSD employees, our students, and their families. This is from Deborah Tabush, President of Torrance Teachers Association. Good evening, President Reagans, board members, Dr. Stowe, and cabinet. Although Dr. Stowe has been in our district serving in many different roles, I would like to say welcome to your first school board meeting as TUSD superintendent. As TTA president, I will continue to work to keep the lines of communication open to ensure that the safety and health of TUSD employees and students are at the forefront of all reopening decisions or discussions. At the district task force for reopening committees, district Q&A sessions, and the school board workshop, employees were asked some fundamental questions about how sites will remain reopened during the ongoing COVID-19 while keeping employees and students safe. Unfortunately, these questions and concerns have been left unanswered or glossed over with not very reassuring answers due to not having any guidelines from the County Department of Public Health. This has caused unnecessary anxiety and stress. Now that TUSD district leadership has the necessary information, I implore you to share this information in a timely manner. TUSD should advocate for 100% district distance learning model until it is safe to transition into a phase of learning that goes beyond the minimum recommendations put forth by the County Department of Health. Anything less than these recommendations is not acceptable to the health and safety of our schools and community. Educators agree that the classroom setting is the best place for learning to occur, but only when and if transitioning to an in-person model is safe and sustainable for students and employees. We are expected to teach safety precautions throughout the year to our students, and supporting any in-person instruction during these times is not taking a safety-first approach. I urge you tonight to stand with the National Education Association, the California Teachers Association, TTA, and other districts who are putting health and safety of their communities first by advocating for starting school in a virtual setting until TUSD can provide a plan which ensures the health and safety of everyone at their respective school sites. So now I'll begin the reading of the items that seem to be grouped by the health and safety concerns. This is from Pat Harpole at Riviera Elementary. Numerous recent articles available on Google News Search indicate that previous ideas incorrectly assumed that most young children escape COVID-19 infections. A baby as young as 7 months has been infected, and a 5-year-old child recently died. Children of all ages in childcare and the adults that care for them are contracting COVID-19 at increasing speed. 32 states at this time are reporting increasing COVID infection rates, which include young children, and their caretakers. The US has failed to control the infection. Infections are rapidly increasing, which makes the idea of reopening schools next month with children and teachers present a nightmare prospect for both students and their parents and teachers. I believe practically every teacher, myself included, would greatly prefer to have school back as it used to be. It's just not safe to do so now. How do you say, oops, sorry, we shouldn't have jumped that or been pushed into having school open, to the parents of children who get sick and possibly die, and the teachers whose lives are destroyed by having the virus and its subsequent health issues, or who die? This email is from Stephanie Kotoff. My name is Stephanie Kotoff, and I have taught 4th grade for 22 years at Walteria Elementary School. I miss the kids and the classroom tremendously. However, this coming school year must begin remotely. There is no other viable alternative to staying home and staying safe from the spread of COVID-19. This is a dangerous and unpredictable virus and must be taken seriously. Health and safety of students, teachers, and other school staff must come first. In addition, there are just too many what-if questions. What happens if students can't or won't keep masks on during in school time? What happens if students share masks? What happens if students show up without masks with parents that refuse to have their child wear a mask? What happens if students or teachers contract COVID-19 and cannot work, or worse, is hospitalized and or dies? What happens if cleaning supplies and or protective gear are in short supply or can't be procured? What happens if parents knowingly send an ill child to school anyway because they must go to work? The number of COVID-19 cases continues to rise in Los Angeles and surrounding counties. I don't want teachers or students to be put in a position where their health and welfare and the health and welfare of their families are put at risk every single day. Please do the right thing by reopening school remotely. This is from Donna Davanzo at Magruder Middle School. My concern with returning to the classroom, even in a hybrid model, is one of safety. If it is unsafe for prisoners to remain in a prison, an environment where who comes in and who they associate with at all times is completely controlled, how could it possibly be safe in a classroom where we have no control over who associates with whom as soon as the students leave the campus? We have no way of knowing who they hang out with after school or who their family has been in contact with. It gives me pause. And with that, I'll pause, take a drink. Thank you. Okay, from Doreen Nilsson, North High School teacher. Dr. Stowe, what is the expectation for teachers at higher risk to be able to teach virtually until we have a vaccine? I'm 65 and in good health and want to stay that way and not ready to retire. I love my job. I look forward to Monday night board meeting and your response. This is from Ashley Basmagian. Good afternoon. My name is Ashley Basmagian and I teach at Magruder Middle School. I know that July 13th is when the board will be making a decision on the upcoming school year. I am not one to send messages on my opinions, but I'm going to stand up for what I believe is right. I do not think starting the school year on August 26th in person is the best idea. I know there are so many differing opinions on this topic, and everyone is truly entitled to their own opinion. I 100% think kids need to go back to school, but only when it is safe. It is not safe with the current state of the world. Everyone is trying so hard to navigate all the constantly evolving COVID information. So how could we possibly make a decision on July 13th for an entire school year? There is no doubt that it is going to be a tough decision. In my school, we always talk about data. I know the data points to the fact that there are very few kids between the ages of 0 and 17 who get sick. This is great, but that does not mean it is not impossible. We need teachers and staff for students to come to school. If they are sick, what will happen? How will kids go to school? We had lots of trouble getting subs last year, and I can't even imagine trying to get one this year. I also do not believe that we have the resources needed to make this happen. We have 60 PPE days, or 60 days of PPE. I assume we would still go to school on Wednesdays, so we would need a lot more to make it for the whole school year. I heard in one of the meetings last week that kids are not allowed to have hand sanitizer. Is this actually true? I am sure you have been to a middle school recently and know those kids cannot keep their distance and like to touch everything. They definitely need to be able to carry hand sanitizer. I know that we are also still not allowed to use Lysol wipes. I do not think the school cleaner is on the approved COVID list. If it is, please send over the name so I can purchase more to clean my own room. We barely get our floors cleaned twice a week. That I bring my own little vacuum to school. It is hard to believe our rooms will be disinfected as much as we are told. We run out of soap in bathrooms as well. How can we guarantee that we will have all the supplies we need? Not only cleaning supplies, but classroom supplies. I would be a millionaire if I got $1 every time I asked a student to borrow a pencil. So there are so many questions that I could write a book, but I will stop there. With reopening in-person classes, the burden will be on the teachers. We are always expected to go above and beyond, and we always do because we care about kids. I do not want my students to get sick. I need to care about myself, my family, and all the other teachers and staff at my school. I need them if we want this school year to be a successful one. Okay. This is from Wendy Ryder. Hello, Dr. Stowe and school board members. I am writing in concern for the district's plans to physically reopen schools in August, specifically board agenda item 11.3 as well as 11.4 and 11.5. I'm a teacher at Birtland Middle School as well as a parent of a third grader at Victor Elementary. I've been watching the past board meetings and attended the teacher presentation. I sent in my questions, 13 of which for the most part were not covered within the presentation. There was a lot of, we're waiting for the LA County Health Department orders. I feel that the health and safety of teachers, staff, and students will not be safeguarded with any physical return to campuses in August. Emerging evidence being shared with the public regarding the spread of COVID-19 in indoor spaces. The virus can stay in the air even in small particulates. Now put yourself in our small, poorly ventilated classrooms with yourself and around 15 students. Everybody is wearing cloth face coverings. Even if someone is wearing them correctly, which I doubt will happen given my observations of adults in the community not wearing them properly, small droplets will still get mixed into the air. Middle school, students come in first period. They are in there for 53 minutes. Then these students go to another room and they are there for 53 minutes. This continues for 6 periods during the school day. All the while, the teacher is in the classroom, where 75 students have been breathing. The teacher is exposed to this air for the whole day, 4 days a week. Elementary. My son would be in a class with 14-ish third graders for 2.5 hours each day. Masks will most definitely be worn incorrectly, messed around with, and allow more particulates to get in the air. Not a health and safety environment. And then there's 2 links to a Harvard article and a WebMD article on air conditioning. A rising caseload, positivity rate of infection and hospitalizations. Remember, death rate is going to lag, but will begin to increase as well. California, LA County in particular, is not showing signs of stability or controlling COVID spread in the community. There are problems with testing and contact tracing. Torrance Unified has given no indication that they would be testing teachers or students for COVID. Instead, they want to rely on the question and observation approach. What they don't account for is that many times people will be asymptomatic or will not show signs of the virus until 2 or 3 days in, spreading the disease unknowingly. When would they consider testing? This is a question that has not been addressed. If a student or teacher has flu-like symptoms, That's okay. This is from Sarah Smith, second grade teacher, Fern Avenue Elementary. Good evening, board members and cabinet. I would like to start by thanking all of you for your tireless work over the past months and for holding workshops to allow all stakeholders an opportunity to ask questions and express concerns. It is a very trying time, and I know that all of us, first and foremost, want all students and staff to remain safe. I follow the virus numbers daily, as I am sure you do as well. I also follow surrounding districts in the county to gain awareness of their response to the pandemic in regards to school reopening. I have noticed that due to the rise in cases, the high positivity rate, and the community spread, several districts are opting to begin the year with a full distance learning model. As the curve flattens, these districts will then revisit the idea of a physical return to school using a hybrid model. At this time, it seems to make the most sense if we are actively seeking what is safest for everyone. Based on the data, a return to school too soon, even with PPE, will result in many positive cases and possibly even death. I would like nothing more than to be able to instruct my students in the fashion we've always been accustomed to. But I more so value my safety, my health, the health of my husband, who has underlying health conditions, and the health of my elderly family members. I understand parents are eager to get their kids back to school in overwhelming numbers. They have worn many hats for many months and are now more than likely exhausted from this new way of life. They are not alone. We all feel this, but unfortunately, we will be in this situation for 12 to 18 months. I am concerned that the desire to have kids back in school is possibly the driving force of the decisions that will be made tonight. PPE does not provide 100% protection from the virus. Our classrooms have very poor ventilation, and the number of kids on campus at one time, even with social distancing, is just too many. This is truly not safe for anyone involved. Being proactive with what is safe at this time, which I believe is distance learning, will undoubtedly beat being reactive if we move too quickly with the return to physical school, and the result is illness or even death. Many educators are not comfortable speaking out and have asked me to share that I speak on their behalf as well. Again, I appreciate your time and know that no one wants to take this risk in a time of great uncertainty. These questions are sent in by Aaron Gilton. I am a teacher in the district and have some questions about the conditions for reopening. 1, how will sick pay be handled if a teacher is exposed to COVID as a result of work? 2, do we have enough substitute teachers to handle the potential for a 2-week quarantine for any potentially exposed teachers? 3, what will the process be for teachers who have a higher risk of infection and cannot safely interact closely with students? 4, who will enforce face mask or mask policies and social distancing for students? 5, what exactly would the criteria be to close schools? 6, does the recent surge in infection rate have an effect on reopening plans? 7, how will we ensure students have sufficient access to technology, the internet, to complete their assignments? 8, is there any option for on-campus study hall for students who are unable to complete work at home? 9, who will be disinfecting classrooms between classes? And 10, if students are eating lunches in classrooms, how will teachers be given a duty-free lunch? This question comes from Christine Cruz, a teacher at South High School. I have reviewed the proposals and I appreciate the time that has gone into creating these plans. I am concerned about the fact that no clear plan has been created to address the issues of when a class or teacher needs to be quarantined and how this will be dealt with in terms of teacher sick time. Will teachers be required to teach from home? Will a substitute be provided? Will teachers be charged days due to a required government quarantine? I am also concerned about the process to decide which teachers will be allowed to teach distance versus those doing a hybrid model. This has not been clearly explained, and I think it needs to be clear. Lastly, I'm going to follow up on my questions about Google Suite. I am a teacher. In the teacher town hall, I was told that it would be looked into. Since it is not recommended to collect papers to limit contact, Google Classroom seems to be the safest and smartest way to collect work and give comments grades back. However, we only have the basic version of this program, and it does have limits. The extra add-ons for Google Slides, such as Pear Deck, as well as having access to the full plagiarism check, is important to help teachers as well as monitor students. The current plan we have only allows 3 assignments to be checked per class. This wouldn't even get most teachers through a whole unit. Please consider the importance of this when evaluating spending money to improve the options for teachers and students. This is from David Ryder. Dr. Stowe and school board members, this letter is to express my concern with Torrance Unified's plan to reopen schools in August based on agenda item 11.3. While I appreciate the support and district's efforts to evaluate the situation and focus on returning students, faculty, and staff to the classroom, I don't believe that the method being considered is appropriate, nor the timing correct based on how COVID-19 has been spreading since the state's reopening. In fact, I believe it's reckless, short-sighted, and dangerous. The decision to reopen schools should not be based on politics, but on public health information and supporting scientific evidence. At this point in time, I have little confidence that the state of California, let alone the Torrance Unified School District, has enough information, scientific evidence, or the infrastructure in place to properly and effectively support the reopening of schools across the district based on the CDC guidelines. The district's #1 priority should be protecting students, faculty, and staff, and base its decision on their safety, not the political rhetoric coming from Washington, D.C. I have listened to past board meetings, and not a single one gave me any confidence that the district is focusing on the health and safety of people. My wife is a teacher at Birtland Middle School, and our 8-year-old son is a student at Victor Elementary School. And I have not seen the evidence from Torrance Unified to relieve my concern that any method of reopening will limit and/or reduce the potential exposure to COVID-19. Rather, I believe the district's lack of strategy exposes everyone to a far greater degree of risk than what is appropriate. I have been analyzing varying methods of educating students for this coming school year, and none of them are truly feasible other than 100% distance learning. Here are some ideas which I evaluated. Increasing the physical size of the school. Purchase, lease additional temporary buildings. Hybrid approach, 100% distance learning. Increasing the physical size of the school is impossible and thus cannot be considered. Purchasing, leasing additional temporary buildings is also impossible because the time required to procure them is too long to accommodate the upcoming school year. Also, every school will suffer significant budget shortfalls because they lack the funding required to acquire the buildings and will not be able to hire additional teachers quickly enough to fill the new classrooms. The district cannot afford to literally double its teaching staff, even if it could complete the hiring process in time. A hybrid approach is not reasonable because it exposes students, faculty, and staff to COVID-19 at an accelerated rate. It is nearly impossible to control the logistics of exiting students interacting with entering students and teacher and faculty exposure to all students. Masks and social distancing are immediately compromised before students even enter the classroom. This is from Catherine Banham, Birtland Middle School music teacher. I am writing today as both a parent and a teacher. So much has changed in the past few weeks since the surveys have gone out to employees and parents. On June 10th, I responded to the employee survey that I was somewhat comfortable with returning to school with precautions. However, since that time, the COVID-19 numbers in this county and our state have spiked, and now I am not comfortable returning to in-person instruction at this time. With the blended model of instruction, secondary teachers will be exposed to 80 to 100 students per day, with some teachers, including myself, seeing up to 150 a day. That's a lot of exposure in our classrooms when students are moving in and out every 50 minutes. Do teachers get to choose whether they want to be in the classroom or teaching distance learning? Data has shown that children are relatively safe from this virus. But there have been many cases of healthy children getting it with long-term life-changing consequences. I don't want my own elementary-aged children to be one of those statistics. And hearing of healthy 30-year-olds who get it and die makes me even more concerned. We have more daily cases and more hospitalizations now than we did in March when schools closed. How can we consider returning to school in a month when this virus is completely out of control and the variables surrounding it are still so unknown? And what will happen later this fall when the regular flu season arrives? I am entering my 25th year of teaching, and I love my classroom, my students, and my job. I searched for 10 years for the perfect community with the right blend of schools, students, and parents, and I found it in Torrance. It's why we have chosen to live and raise our children in the same neighborhood my husband and I teach in. But it would be devastating to me if one of my students, colleagues, or their families got sick or passed away from these small statistics. And I need to protect my family above all. Please consider keeping schools closed until such time when cases are in check and we can protect our community together. This next is from Kim Evett. I had responded to a number of questions, so I read this as this is what she wanted to read instead. Perhaps I should back up and then ask, which is more important, the method of instruction or the health and safety of our students and staff? Should we be sacrificing the health and safety, the health of our staff and teachers in favor of instruction, or should we sacrifice instruction to protect our health? This is from Wesley Christian. Since I will likely be unable to attend tonight's meeting, I will send my question now. What is more important to the district, the health and safety of our students and staff, or the instruction? It's almost identical to what I read, but it's a different person. So in other words, are we willing to sacrifice safety in order to ensure better instruction, or are we willing to sacrifice instruction to ensure better safety? In my opinion, that safety of our students and staff should be our #1 priority. This is from Gilbert Gonzalez Jr. To whom it may concern, I work at Hamilton Adult School in Torrance. I am writing to express my extreme concern about a possible decision to reopen the campus in the fall of 2020 amidst record high numbers of positive COVID-19 cases in California, particularly Southern California. As someone who has worked with special needs students in particular for over 20 years, I am well aware of the inability to keep our students safe during the pandemic such as this. It is near impossible to expect special needs students to understand, let alone comply with the rigorous hand washing, sanitizing, social distancing, and mask wearing required to give them a fighting chance at fighting coronavirus infection. Many of these special needs students require one-on-one assistance and aids to assist them behaviorally and academically. That would put all staff at risk of infection as well. The classrooms are small, and even with mask wearing, we would be no match for the virus. I plead you to consider reopening. Our hospitals are already at capacity. This would bring a new level of devastation and tragedy to our communities if we physically return to campus.
Madam President, it's time. 30 minutes is up.
Well, we've reached our 30-minute time limit for public comment. Thank you for reading those, Dr. Stowe. I see you still have a stack there, but that's the limit of what we're able to share today. There will be opportunities in subsequent meetings. I guess I should let folks know. I do want to.
This is Reagan's. I do have one more that was emailed in that I didn't get a chance to print out, and it wasn't on this topic. It was on a different non-agendized item.
Okay. Is it okay with the board if we let him go ahead and read that one, since he's identifying that one in particular? Okay.
This is from Arthur Shopper. He writes, for this Torrance School Board meeting tonight, I am submitting the following. The Torrance School Board must implement a policy which bars students, staff, etc., from using official school district logos for personal social media accounts, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc. 2, The TUSD school board must direct the administration at Madrona Middle School to inform the students using the Instagram.com/MMS Wildcats account to remove any references indicating that it's an official account of the school district. They should not be using the logo of the school either. Number 3, the TUSD school board needs to connect with the city of Torrance and implement the same technology which they are using, which allows individuals in the community to call into the meeting and speak on record. Submitting comments in writing is not sufficient, and I am certain that the city of Torrance can assist with setting this technology up. Number 4, the TUSD school board should table any discussion about opening the schools in the fall until there are clear instructions coming from the state about feasibility and discretion of rules and health policies. For the time being, I believe it remains an unpopular decision, but I suggest that the school board opt for keeping the schools closed at this time. The legal wrangling with which will ensue, having to compete with conflicting rules and directives from the governor will open the school district to untenable lawsuits.
That's it? Okay, thank you. I just want to remind people that because these are oral communications or unscheduled hearings about non-agenda items, we are unable to respond or answer the questions, actually, and there were many of them at this point in time. But hopefully those questions will be answered in subsequent communications, and or if you don't receive answers, please contact us again. We don't want to leave questions unanswered for folks who are out there.
And Mr. Riggins, if I may
Yes.
chime in one more
Please.
time, I do appreciate all the folks that have been sending in these emails, and we really are doing everything that we can to provide answers and get things out to you. Like I said, I personally responded to almost every single one of them today and last night. So please continue to reach out and make sure that that you are supported, and we do want to make sure that we answer these questions. And I know the board members feel the same, but I just felt it was important to say.
Well, and do be aware there will be many public sessions coming up for parents and community members to ask questions and get their questions answered in the next several weeks until we actually do move to decide what's happening with moving forward to our school year. So please make sure you avail yourself of those situations. In particular, this Thursday, there are 2 different sessions for parents. One in the morning for, I believe, for the elementary, and then at 5:00 p.m. for secondary. So please attend those. The information is on the website, and help us with your input and your comments and your questions. There's many, many, many considerations here. We will move on to our discussion action items. I do have instructions to the public about these too. I have a few emails to read that are relevant to these, and we will try to hold all of those readings to 3 minutes or less and no more than 30 minutes. I don't believe that what I have will take that long. Dr. Stowe, I think you have a couple too that are relevant to okay. So when they come up, we'll get to that. The first of our discussion action items is approval of the proposed board policies update for May 2020 revisions. It's the first reading. I would entertain a motion for that, and maybe waive second.
I just made that motion.
Okay,
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the May 2020 revisions with first reading and waiving of the second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Next is 11.3, the adoption of the distance learning model for the 2020-2021 school year. And again, that's the next 3 items are the main business that we are going to be addressing this evening, is looking at those models of instruction and whether we are going to vote to have those put into place for our students. Dr. Stowe, do you want to begin that, or is that Dr. Crumpy?
Sure, I believe you need a motion and a second for.
Oh, yes, thank you. Can I get a motion and a second for the distance learning model for the 2021 school year?
I will move that we approve that item.
Okay, We have a motion and a second, a couple of seconds. I saw you. Actually, we have two motions and a second. And we will proceed then with presentation.
That emotion, anyway.
Yeah, we're fine. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Reagans and board members. And thank you for the opportunity tonight to bring forward instructional models that are being proposed for the 2021 school year. I realize there's a significant amount of information recently regarding the COVID-19 situation. And then today, after weeks of waiting, the LA County Department of Public Health released new health orders for the reopening of schools. I received an email from the LA County Office of Education with a link to these orders at 4:13 and have yet to review them. But we will in the next couple of days. We will go through them thoroughly and bring that information back to the board. Tonight's item is asking the board to decide on the instructional models that our task force and committees have worked on to develop for the past 7 weeks. As you stated, tonight we are not asking the board to make a decision on whether or not we're physically returning to school in August. That decision is not on the agenda and it cannot be voted on tonight per the Brown Act. This item will be brought to the board at a future meeting, and I'm proposing a special session upcoming on August 3rd that we would have that discussion. The models presented tonight here are twofold. One, a fully distance learning experience for students whose parents choose not to send them to school physically for the 2021 school year. And two, a blended learning option for students who, if permitted by the state and county health orders, could return to school safely. And again, I want to emphasize the safety piece of this is first and foremost for students, for staff, for families. And so as Dr. Crumpy speaks about these two models tonight, we are asking parents to choose whether they are going to be in the distance learning model or the blended learning option. And if the blended learning option is permissible and we can safely bring students back to school physically, we will do that. If it gets to the point where we cannot bring students safely to school and with staff in the blended learning option, then we will remain fully virtual for that as well. So tonight, Dr. Crumpy will speak to these models. They are the recommended options that we have shared during our 3 previous school board sessions, as well as the Zoom meetings we've held with parents and staff in the last week. So at this point in time, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Crumpy.
Thank you, Dr. Stowe. And just to reiterate what Mrs. Reagans and Dr. Stowe said, I think, the entire time that the instructional committee has been talking about these options, and we started conversations the Friday before Memorial Day back in May, it was really to ensure that whatever model was recommended, that it would be able to be provided and instructed in whatever format we were in, given the time, be it a safer at home order, all the way to a full reopening. So while there's been a lot of creative ideas and a lot of suggestions being given to what kind of models that we might give, we really did pay attention on whether we would be able to pivot and for example, offer the blended learning models that we're going to talk about in a minute virtually. So that being said, we also designed these models so that they would be as consistent as possible for our students, regardless of which models that families choose. I think also has been kind of mentioned tonight, but new information that on Wednesday, families should be receiving an information guide from us about the reopening of schools. This document was created to assist parents as they make their choice for their students. And then on Thursday, I do encourage our elementary families to participate in our information Q&A this Thursday at 10 a.m. and our secondary families to participate at 5 p.m. that same evening, where we will go into more specific details about each program. The links to these sessions are on our website and will be emailed to you in a reminder email on Wednesday. And the sessions will also be recorded for those parents that are not able to attend. First slide, Gil. So our distance learning model. Although there may be some flexibility based on space, this model was designed for families not wishing to return to school during the 2020-2021 school year. Students will learn from home full-time and will not attend school on campus. Similar to a regular school day, students will be on a schedule, have specific class times or periods, and will be required to attend Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday to receive instruction from a teacher or teachers. On Wednesday, they will learn mostly asynchronously. We've got a lot of questions about, tell me exactly what this model looks like. And I think it might be a really answer to say, it looks exactly like this. But the better answer is that the model is being designed based on the needs of our students. This means that we need to see who these students are. We're asking families to make a choice. And then we're designing it to best ensure that the needs of our students are being met. At the secondary level, we don't want to limit our students to a certain schedule based on grade level, but we want to design a program around their class choices. For example, a 10th grade student might be in a chemistry honors class. There might be only 5 students that have chosen distance learning. This isn't enough students to offer a section, of course. So possibly that chemistry honors teacher might choose to put those students in cohort A about the blended learning model I'm going to discuss in a minute. And those students might actually be learning synchronously and asynchronously along with the blended learning students just from home. But they also might be in an English class that is being taught by a teacher who is teaching at home distance learning, and then they would be live synchronously on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. So it really depends what it's going to look like based on us trying to meet the needs of the students so that they aren't having to choose different course offerings, and we can provide them as close to their class schedule as possible. The next slide, Gil. So some of you have seen this slide before. At the elementary level, there is a platform via Google Classroom that our students are going to utilize. The teacher, based on the needs of the student in his or her class, may choose to teach a lesson during the first hour of the day. And then they may provide direction based on the curriculum that is built within this platform and send them off to work asynchronously throughout the day, because they might choose to maybe break an elementary class of 27 up into 3 groups of 9 and teach in smaller groups throughout the day. It really depends on the teacher. We have created this distance learning platform to aid in the consistency across all grade levels and our school sites, but there still is the personal touch of our professional teachers that will be instructing throughout the day as well. In the parent information that I referred to earlier, there is also a video link to a 10-minute information video that gives parents kind of a more lengthy and descriptive overview of this platform. Again, I know that many questions about this model, there are a lot of questions, and I encourage you to try to participate on Thursday at either 10 a.m. or 5 p.m. So that we can answer some specific questions about distance learning. Bill, next slide. So blended learning. So in a blended learning model, students are going to learn from go to school for part of the week and learn from home for part of the week. So if you choose this option, students are going to be broken up into 2 cohorts. Elementary students will be assigned a TUSD elementary credential teacher, and secondary students will be assigned their 6 TUSD subject matter credentialed teachers. So teachers will be teaching in the credentialed fields that they are credentialed for. Next. So this is an elementary model of what a day could look like. And I know this looks a little complicated, but it's really not as complicated as it looks. And really Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday are exactly the same. If you would be in the AM cohort, you're going to go to class in the morning for about 2.5 hours a day. But then when you go home in the afternoon, you have approximately 90 minutes. It's less for kindergarten, but you have approximately 90 minutes of asynchronous at-home instruction that your child will need to do. This is because the state has given us direction that requires 240 or 4 hours of instructional minutes, a day. So we've broken this up in an approximately 2.5 hour and 90-minute session. Likewise, if you're in the PM class, you would have that 90 minutes in the morning where you would learn asynchronously, and then in the afternoon you would have the live face-to-face instruction for approximately 2.5 hours with your teacher. I actually want to thank one of our parents, Kim Romero, who helped us come up with this schematic to try to put a picture in your mind of what this looks like. On Wednesday, there's a lot of things that are going to be happening, but one of the nice things is that it's possible that a teacher can log on both groups of kids in the morning, and that they can do something together as a class of 27. This would be the time that school principals could gather for assemblies, because they would be able to do things with all kids together as a school, because everybody would be learning from home on Wednesdays together. And so that's a schematic of the elementary model. Gil, next slide. And you've seen this before. This is just another quick summary of why the elementary instructional committee is recommending the AM/PM model. They feel very strongly that students really need that daily, as much as possible, face-to-face time, with their students. And because we would still have seats in every classroom for all of the students, the half of the students coming in and sitting in one seat and then in the PM, they would come and sit in alternate seats. So students would not be sharing seats at the elementary level throughout the day. And so that's really the main reason why the elementary committee is recommending this model for a board to adopt this evening. Next slide. Secondary blended learning model is a little bit, say, simpler, less busy as a model. If you were in cohort A, you would be attending campus class periods 1 through 6 all day on Mondays and Thursdays. And if you're in cohort B, you would then be learning asynchronously from home on those days for 240 minutes if you're asynchronous. And then you would flip-flop. So cohort B would come to campus the next day, learn between 8 and 3 all day long, and cohort A would be working asynchronously at home. Wednesday is the recommended choice from the committee. It would give teachers to have a midweek check-in, so they could answer questions from any of the asynchronous instruction on Monday and Tuesday, and also kind of foreshadow some of the work Thursday and Friday that they would be assigning to their students. And then as for both models, elementary and secondary, it provides both the professional development, staff time, and PLC time, so that we can have ensure that consistency between whatever model that students may be in, the blended learning or the distance learning. And yet again, the pros and cons of the alternate day model. I did get a number of questions and just wanted to emphasize that, why are they not recommending AM/PM? Because there might be, less students on campus. there's actually more students on campus, and in a high school, if they were to go on an AM/PM model, that would mean 2,000 students would be on campus every day. With this model, it's half of that size. And so that was also a main con, having 2,000 students on campus, or at most of our elementary schools that many have under 500 or under, that's a lot less students coming in and out of a campus than 800 and 900 at a middle school or 2,000 at a high school. And there are so many different exceptions within a high school day, to kind of reinforcing that we design our master schedules around what students want. That if that means that we hire part-time teachers for sections that we need, or sometimes we have traveling teachers so that we can continue to offer courses that otherwise we would not be able to offer because a school can't, doesn't have enough students for 5 sections of full-time offering at a class. All of that traveling and part-time nature makes an AM/PM model quite difficult. And we have a robust 8th grade program of students who participate on our taking high school courses early, and an AM/PM model is very disruptive to that. For that reason, the instructional committee is recommending to the board that there are different models for elementary and secondary, given the opportunity if we're able to safely open our schools. Thank you.
Did you have anything to add here at the end, Dr. Stowe?
No, Mrs. Reagan's I've got a couple things to be read and then open it up for board discussion.
Okay, go ahead.
One question from Sarah Froelich. If TUSD goes to distance learning in elementary school, why do we need a decreased amount of teaching minutes from a typical year? Also, is it an option to have teaching in the same number of live minutes as a typical school year, but just online, like in Zoom? Thank you. And this one is from Tracy Bergen, a 3rd grade teacher at Walteria. Dear board members, I would like to express my thanks to the district for working so hard on a plan for resuming school in the fall. The AM/PM plan is reasonable, safe, and thoughtful. As an elementary teacher, I feel safe and confident in this approach. The AM/PM model gives students safe in-person contact with their teachers, which is more effective than distance learning. The American Academy of Pediatrics recognizes that in addition to physical health, the social, emotional, and mental health of our youth is critically important. This TUSD plan considers all aspects of children's health. I urge the board to vote for the AM/PM. And I read that with this because we just did the whole presentation, just so you can consider it all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have actually, it looks like 4 different letters to add to the consideration. The first is from Julie Yamashita Daisom. Dear members of the board, I'd like to begin by thanking you for the tremendous amount of time and dedication and effort that has been focused on the safe reopening of schools here in Torrance. Your work has not gone unnoticed, and parents in the community recognize all you are doing. I've watched every single board meeting and parent meeting with regards to plans for reopening, and I'm thoroughly impressed with the high quality educational standards being preserved. My 3 children are students in TUSD. I have a kindergartner, a 3rd grader, and a 7th grader. I'm also an employee in TUSD and have worked as a paraeducator, a health assistant, and substitute teacher. Currently, I'm finishing up my PPSC in school counseling and social work. With that said, I'd like to share my thoughts on this unprecedented situation as a parent and employee who understands the needs from multiple angles. First, the parent surveys disseminated last month were great, and I appreciate the opportunity to contribute to the decision-making process and the board's focus on data-driven practices. However, I feel that the results lacked disaggregation. There were 4 options allowing parents to choose either definitely or likely in regards to interest in either hybrid or distance. I feel that the results shared 70 to 80% of parents wanting an in-person option should have been disaggregated so that we could see what percentage actually indicated definitely or likely. I personally may have chosen likely, but I would not want to be included in the 70 to 80% of parents, excuse me, who supposedly want in-person to resume. Honestly, I was unsure at that point what I wanted and still am to some degree without knowing what safeguards would be in place to make it difficult to have a firm opinion on that matter. I wish there was more transparency, not only in the reporting of data, but on how the data would be used so parents understand the seriousness of their selection. The same goes for the follow-up survey. I would have known exactly how this data would, if I had known how this data would have been used, I would have been more careful in my selections. Additionally, I've been following associations such as UTLA and CTA, and there's a growing consensus to delay the physical reopening of schools and start the school year with 100% distance learning, with at least until January of 2020. With the rising cases in LA County, I'm gravely concerned about not only the well-being of students, but also the well-being of staff and educators. If I had a choice, I would advocate for 100% distance learning this year. There are too many unknowns. What if a child tests positive? Will schools shut down? For how long? We talk about the social emotional effects of children being away from school, but what happens to a beloved teacher if a beloved teacher contracts COVID and is hospitalized? How will this impact students' mental state? What will these social emotional impacts be on children and forcing them to maintain distance from their friends and enforcing strict social distancing guidelines, overhauling all aspects of socialization? This could be traumatic and impactful on students' mental state. Is this something that is appropriate? And it's further compounded by disturbing spikes seen in COVID cases in the county. Even numbers in Torrance have seen a sharp increase in the last few weeks alone. Furthermore, I believe the board should release results from the staff teacher surveys conducted in TUSD. In order to ensure transparency, parents and community members should have access to the information. Do teachers and staff feel safe under a blended model? As a staff member myself, I would absolutely not feel safe. This is crucial. And in closing, I realize that hours and hours of careful planning have occurred to get us where we are today. It would be heartbreaking if we did not make use of these plans, but I feel it would be more heartbreaking to use them at the wrong time. I fear that even a blended model would put our community at risk. Little data exists on the effects of COVID on children, but our N is about to increase hugely as in-person instruction resumes, even under a blended model. Do you want to have the precious children of our community be part of an experiment? My answer is a hard no. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to express my opinion. Thank you, Julie. Now I have Leela Rayo, a parent. I'm a parent of a soon-to-be second grader at Walteri Elementary. I appreciate the challenges facing the board and district in these challenging times. I'm grateful for the work that has gone into developing the proposals for educating our children while protecting against the spread of COVID-19 this fall. That said, I'm urging the board to reconsider the proposed AM/PM split for elementary students returning to school under the hybrid model. While I understand the logic behind proposing the split for our elementary students, I fear it places an undue burden on dual working families and the child care system that is currently in place to assist families like ours. Schools are not child care, but are here to educate our youth. That said, the fact that child care is a necessity is something that is recognized by the district in that it has partnered with the YMCA to provide first-rate before and after school care on campus for families who need it. Our child has been using the Y for not only before and after school care, but also for summer care this past summer. What the Y has set up this summer to engage the children while keeping them safe and healthy is nothing but amazing. However, it requires significant space that is frankly just not available at the on-campus locations. If the district chooses to go with an AM/PM model, I fear it puts the Y in an impossible position to assist working families and provide care that is so desperately needed. With the AM/PM model, there are significant chunks of the day when both cohorts would need simultaneous care, which is just not physically possible in the Y trailers. The TUSD board must balance many competing priorities, which is challenging in the best of times. Unfortunately, I fear that the AM/PM model will further strain the resources of dual working families many of whom, like myself, are facing pay cuts and furloughs. These stresses will only be exacerbated if there are inadequate childcare options, and the children will suffer the consequences. Going with an AB model is much more likely to work with the schedules of working parents, as this is what is considered in many workplaces to ensure adequate social distancing. In addition, the AB schedule allows the Y to develop schedules that provide fair distribution of care to all parents while minimizing overlapping cohorts and allowing sufficient social distancing during care. I appreciate your consideration of this matter and do not envy your position, but urge you to reconsider the elementary schedule or at least postpone a final decision until the Y has come before you and presented their proposed plans for care under each of the proposed models. Additionally, if time permits, an additional survey directed towards parents of elementary students might prove valuable, since many may have thoughts in prior surveys, as I did, that the only option that was being considered for hybrid schooling was the AB model, and as such may not have identified childcare as an issue. I personally indicated that I was uncertain regarding childcare, in large part because I incorrectly assumed that AB would be the model under consideration. Had AM/PM been listed as an option, I would have indicated that childcare was definitely going to be an issue. Thus, if the current survey results are being used to justify the decision being made, I again urge your reconsideration. And that's Leela Rayo. And last but not least, I have Karen G. Dr. Stowe and members of the board, I'm writing to advocate for the recent AM/PM model for elementary. I know that the vote is tonight, and I'm hopeful that you will vote in favor of the current recommendation. And here is why. This model provides consistency that elementary age children so desperately need. This model requires less asynchronous learning, which is better for younger kids and more manageable for parents to assist. It also lightens the burden of the double work that a teacher would have to do. Instead of providing 4 hours of asynchronous learning for the at-home cohort and 4 or more hours of in-class learning for the at-school cohort, teachers would only have to provide 90 minutes of asynchronous learning each day. This model requires young students to wear a mask for a shorter period of time and gives teachers a break in the day where they can take off their masks and eat lunch without having to supervise their students at lunchtime. This model removes lunch and the cleaning contamination issues it would inevitably bring, the students eating without masks and teachers having to keep the students from playing together. This model also presumably provides more instructional minutes for children with their teacher. Since a possible schedule hasn't been released, that's just a presumption, but I think that's how it would break down. The AM/PM model is 2.5 hours of instruction with a teacher 4 days a week. I assume that would be a 15-minute recess in there, and that would mean 2 hours and 15 minutes of instructional time 4 days a week. With a teacher, that's 9 hours. Since students are also seeing their teacher every day, teachers will be better able to move forward with a concept instead of constantly having to reteach. The AB model, if the school were to adopt a 5-hour-a-day schedule to meet the updated California budget instructional minute requirement, and 1 hour of that day was spent on lunch and recess, then they would only have 4 hours of instructional minutes with a teacher twice a week. One of the major cons of this model mentioned by the teachers is how much reteaching it would require. So now students not only have less time with the teacher, but that time is also spent reteaching already taught concepts. Most of the arguments I've heard against the AM/PM model focus on childcare or how inconvenient it will be for parents with students in both elementary and secondary. I implore the board to focus on what is best for the students and to reiterate to parents that the task force is working hard to make sure that childcare will be available for working parents that need it. I do not believe that childcare should be the driving factor in this decision, although I do see it as an important one, as my household consists of 2 working parents where both parents are required to work outside the home. Honestly, any blended model is going to be inconvenient for most parents that are working, but the focus should always be on the children and on safety. And that is it. So we have a motion and a second to deal with the first item here, which is the approval or adoption of the distance learning model for the 2021 school year. Does anybody have any questions, comments, issues about that distance learning model before we take a vote?
I'd like to
Mr. Gerson, go ahead.
say a few things. First, before we vote, I did want to thank the hundreds of community members that participated in the task force to bring this before us. The board workshop, I was excited because we had just increased the number of people who could come on board to the meetings, and we got up to 297. And then the parent Q&A pushed us up over 500. And once again, we had to expand. And so now I'm happy that we were able to get up over that, because I saw at one point we had 633 on tonight, which is awesome. I'm really excited about the number of emails that we've received and the number of people who are participating. To explain why it's so important to me to hear all of your opinions is it's like going to a conference for those people who've had the opportunity to go to many conferences. While 90% of what you hear is something that we've already covered in previous board meetings, or it was a question I've already asked, you always get that, you're looking for that 10%, that thing that you missed. And so every time we've heard from people, there's always one or two things that pop up that I get to add. If at the last presentation, I might have forgotten, when I didn't see gate listed, if someone else hadn't initiated the thought of special populations in a conversation. And so I appreciate that. The last 4 days, Thursday through Sunday, have been really eventful on this. Probably the question that I've been asked the most is, am I surprised by the the increase in cases? And to each of those people, I said, no, I'm actually surprised at how many people are asking me if I'm surprised. Based on how we've seen people live in the recent weeks, the rise in numbers isn't surprising. And now that the governor has shut us down, there's going to be a changing of that curve again. And so it's so hard for me to predict what things are going to be like 3-4 weeks from now. But today, the County Public Health finally released some guidance. It's 13 pages long. And the decision that we're making right now, page 5 is where that is located. And I just wanted people to hear. It says measures are in place to ensure physical distancing. They're not saying social distancing anymore, physical distancing within classrooms. And there's a few bullet points. The school day has been divided into shifts to permit fewer students per class. So that sounds like AM, PM. Attendance is staggered to reduce the overall number of students in classroom on a given day. That sounds like the AB model that has been presented to us. And the one that's the most interesting to me, it says, online class attendance is offered as an option for students for whom it is feasible and for students who may be at elevated risk in a regular classroom. So on this particular item, I think it's an extremely important thing to have this virtual learning option. I think that over the last couple of months, from what I've been hearing from public health, from Dr. Ferrer and Dr. Kilchick, and from all the other representatives that we've been hearing from, the doctors who I've spoken to over the last 4 days, a lot of pediatricians, and that feasibility point, I think, is important, that as more and more universities are telling staff and telling students, if you can be virtual, we want you to be virtual. I think that's a very important point moving forward. And so that affects my decision as far as how adamantly I will vote in favor of the distance learning option. And on the the AM/PM option, I was deeply concerned that perhaps the PM cohort was going to be at higher level risk than the AM cohort, and that would be that health issue might have been overshadowed by the advantages of instruction. And every single pediatrician that I spoke to this weekend came to the same conclusion, that I was overestimating the risk of surface contact and of the difference between the AM/PM cohort, and so that actually was a good option. And I'm also I didn't get the number of negatives I expected as far as hardship on families. I've only heard 4 hardship stories of the 2,500 that would have a split schedule or all our elementary families. So I think I will be supporting that as well. Thank you for the time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gerson. Anyone else from the board want to make any comments about this? Mr. Lee.
Really quick, can you, because I think we're using terms that we don't always use. We've got a lot of people watching this meeting, you know, it's kind of like they're going to compare what they're seeing on TV. So can Katie or Dr. Crumpy, can you explain, LA Unified in much fanfare today announced that they're going to do all distance learning. So how does that look different than what we're doing, or how that potentially could look different, or those kinds of things? Because I think that's a touch point that everybody at home knows what that looks like.
So I'm unsure exactly how LA Unified is designing their distance learning, but one key piece I think is comes to mind as you ask that question, and that is that we want to offer a distance learning model for all of our families that want to learn from home. But we know that we also have families that, when it is safe and when we are able to do so, want to return to school. And so we're asking for our families to let us know, what those choices are, so we can design our programs in that fashion. So in the inevitability or when we are able to safely return to school, we have less of a disruption to the learning. I know we use these big words sometimes, this continuity of learning, meaning we don't want disruption. So if we can start the year out with providing teachers to the families that want to distance learn and keep that teacher the same, or those group of teachers the same, and likewise assign the blended learning teacher to the students who want to return from school, if and when and how and all, and we can safely do that. Then when those things happen, when we pivot from stage 1, which we are now in again, to stage 2, and then hopefully stage 3 and 4, that then those teachers aren't changing, and we're not having to redo master schedules, and I think most importantly that those connections that our teachers will start forming in August with their students can remain as unchanged and as consistent as possible, so our learning isn't disrupted mid-year, midpoint, or wherever that may be.
Let me follow up on that then. Okay, so I'm a parent and I got a couple of kids. My wife and I work, but I'm concerned. So let's say my neighbor has concerns but wants their kids to go to school. I want my kids to be in distance learning, right? So I'm using the right terms.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so even though we used to go to the same school and we used to have our kids kind of maybe in the same teachers and those kinds of things, in this model, no matter what we do, whether we do all distance learning or we have the one set of kids going to the AB schedules and all the other things, and the other one in full distance learning, they will both have different teachers correct? They will not have the same teachers. They'll have different teachers,
Correct.
with different groups of students. And whether we do distance learning 100% or we do the hybrid that we're talking about, everybody gets to pick what they want, but they're in that group of students with those teachers for the year. So they're going to be, yeah, I think what happens is people think they're going to switch back and forth, but they're going to keep the same continuity of that teacher for the entire year, correct?
Right. We have had families say, what happens? What happens if something life happens? And what happens if there's, a job change or there's some kind of disruption? Can we go back and forth between the models? And we don't want to say no. We want to say we will try to be as flexible as possible, but it really depends on space. So if there's movement and we're able to move kids between the programs, if there is space and we're able to do that, we would want to do it at a point where it's not disruption, like at the end of a grading period, for example. I do want to emphasize two things. One is that regardless of whether those families that live across the street from each other and kids are in the same grade level and like to play and they choose different options, they're going to remain part of their home school regardless of the learning model and the learning situation they're in. And our schools, and we're planning on doing lots of things and many activities virtually, but to make sure that our kids stay connected. We talked about that Wednesday and having an opportunity on those Wednesdays to put groups of kids together. Waiting after tomorrow morning after we have the decision tonight on what are some of those other opportunities that we can do during asynchronous time to provide some extracurricular enrichment activities for kids that will allow that connection. That was the first thing. And the second thing is we brought up childcare. I don't want to steal Dr. Kim's thunder because he's been working tirelessly on this, but we're working with the city of Torrance, but we're also working with the YMCA, and the YMCA in particular is very committed to helping us in whatever way, shape, or form that is. And I know in one of the letters that Mrs. Reagan's read, about space, we are not wanting space to be that limiting factor, meaning we can think out of the box and when we, and try to come up with these options for our families so that we can provide, provide some assistance, for them. We awaited these orders. So we can read them tonight and tomorrow morning, and Dr. Kim can get on the phone with these partners because his committee has been working really hard on some options. We just can't, we're not at liberty to have a flyer ready and publicize yet, but we're really, really working hard on having childcare options for our families.
Yeah, I know the city of Torrance is trying to help as well. I know that
Yes.
with some initial, maybe not quite understanding what we were asking for, but I know they've gotten far more interested because they're important for the middle schools and the after school stuff there. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we've got, once we know where everybody's going to be, we can come up with some doable options. But thank you, especially Dr. Kim and Dr. Crumpy, for looking at the child care issue, because that's a huge part of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Can I ask a clarifying question, Katie, Dr. Crumpy?
Yes.
So let me simplify what you're saying. So distance learning is all at home. Whether we shut down or not, you're going to distance learn pretty much for the year. It's going to be really hard for you to come back in person. However, for the blended learners, right now you are saying that you're going to come to school when we are ready to open up. Mm-hmm. If schools say if the government said we're not going to open up, then you're going to go to virtual learning. So basically, this really comes down to two options. If you're a distance learner, the likelihood of you coming back in person this year is very small. But if you're a blended, the option of you going in person or going virtual, you have both options. Because for safety purposes, everyone's arguing right now is that oh, I want to do blended learning, but everything's going crazy right now and I don't feel safe. So I might have to go virtual. But we're saying, no, if it's blended, the government shuts us down, then we have no choice. Those kids would be able to go virtual. So I think that's what it comes down to for all the parents. Either you're distance learning for the whole year, but if you do blended, you're going to be in person when we're ready to open up. But if the government or we say we cannot open up, then you will go virtual. So you have the option of possible both options, virtual or blended, virtual or in person. Whereas distance learning, you really only have one option. You're going to be home 5 days a week, all year. So I think I want to simplify that for all the. Am I correct on that, Dr. Crumpy?
Yes. I mean, I really like, I'm a student-centered person, and I hate to say that's you're stuck, but with distance learning, because we will allow the movement if we can manage it. But I think your explanation is very accurate. Yes.
And I think that it's important because we understand this is because we're asking parents to make a decision prior to our board decision of opening up or closing.
Absolutely.
And so you have to have that kind of narrative or mindset that if I choose blended learning now, it doesn't mean that, that when things are going crazy, we still have got to send our kids to school. If we shut it down, you'll be able to go virtual,
Right.
Whereas if you don't care whether or not it goes crazy or not, whether we shut or open, you know what, my kid's staying home, that's distance learning for you. And so that kind of simplifies for all the parents that are out there so that they know where they're standing.
Dr. Crumpy?
Yes.
We're not done yet. I just want to clarify. I think Mr. Lee, my colleague, Mr. Lee kind of talked about this, but for clarification for my own understanding of it, and this is for both elementary and secondary schools, if a student were to be on the blended learning model, and again, like Mr. Hahn said, it's only when it's safe, when the state and county are okay with it. If the student were to be on a blended model, will that student have the same teacher for both on-campus days and off-campus days? In other words, say if it's elementary student, say she started the AM class with Mr. Smith, would her PM class at home also be with Mr. Smith? And the same thing for the high school student. If the high school student has Mr. Smith for Mondays and Thursday, who's teaching that student on Tuesday and Friday? Would it be the same teacher?
It's the same teacher. So the teacher who is teaching that Mr. Smith, teaching that student, will be providing that curriculum asynchronously as well. And for the elementary school, for TK5, they have the opportunities. That virtual learning platform photo that I've showed you that has the curriculum being created for our distance learning. Our blended learning teachers in elementary school can also have the opportunity to utilize that in those that curriculum and use that as part of the asynchronous instruction as well. So we're hopefully if they would like, also helping them out so that they've got that asynchronous curriculum created for them. But it's the same teacher. They won't have two teachers.
So same teacher. That means that all teachers will, if a teacher is, for example, immunity compromised, that teacher is likely going to just work do the distance learning model, teaching completely at home. But if it's an on-campus teacher who wants to come on campus and teach his or her children, he or she will teach half the time in person and half the time online then. Like every teacher will be half-half, won't it be like that?
No, so the teacher will teach, so in an elementary school, the teacher has 27 students. That's our contractual number, 27-1. The kids are going to be divided in half. They're going to teach half of them AM and half of them PM. when they're asynchronous means without the teacher. So in the elementary model, students will have 90 minutes of work that they will be doing without the teacher. The teacher will be providing that curriculum. So what the committee has discussed is, so I teach, third grade in the morning, and as they leave, I am explaining to them what they're going to go home and do for the next, for 90 minutes. And then there's a break, rooms can be cleaned, that those kids leave, the next group of kids come in, and then I teach the PM group of students. And then I explain to them as they're leaving what they're going to be doing asynchronously the next morning.
Yeah, so asynchronously is when the student go home and does schooling at home, and the teacher will not be live on video on computer with that person.
Correct.
But would it be a videotape, or would it just be like you go home for this afternoon for AM students in elementary, let's say, PM, you would just do this, chapter 1 to 5 and do these exercises with no video. And then same thing for the high school kids too, if we were to do an AB schedule?
Well, I think there's lots and lots of options and opportunities, and this is starting this week. In our task force meeting today, we talked about what are the 2 next steps for the committee that will, on Thursday, we meet on Thursdays. The first one is to be talking about, now that if we know the models that we will be moving forward with, what teacher tools and supplemental materials may they need to better instruct in the way that they're going to instruct, and then what professional development do they need, and what we will provide. And so there's something that we call flipping the classroom, and it's a term that means quite often you have students do the pre-learning so that you maximize that face-to-face time, and it could be that a teacher chooses to record themselves and have the teachers watch something so that then they can maximize that face-to-face time. I know when I taught, they did a lot of pre-lab material, work asynchronously. So at home, so that when they came to my science classroom, and then I could do that lab activity, and I wasn't sparing that. I was maximizing the face-to-face time by not having them do things that they can do at home. A lot of the work that our students do within a normal school day, because that's been our traditional way of doing things, the teacher is not necessarily instructing them for 55 minutes straight in a class period the whole time. They do a variety of instructional things. And in an elementary school, I think in kindergarten, they often say they change activities on a 10-minute basis, because that's about the attention span. And so learning, and we have learned what are those things that actually are more doable at home, so that we maximize those things at school. And honestly, a lot of the teachers have said that we also have to consider that they're going to have half as many kids in their room. So what they're able to do face-to-face with 13 or 14 or 15 kids, they're a little excited about when they can safely return, because I think that they're going to get so much done that they weren't able to do with 30 students.
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Crumpy. I thought I got it down, thought about some more, and
there's a lot. It's a
going
lot.
in circles, so all right, thank you. I think that clarifies a lot. Thank you.
I can see why it's a little confusing for parents, because it is quite complicated.
Absolutely.
And that's why we need the time to be able to get it set up and sorted out for our people to be able to do it. I am concerned about whether we'll have enough teachers to make it happen, though, especially considering letters like the ones that Dr. Stowe was reading, many of which were from teachers, saying that they're reconsidering and thinking, yeah, maybe they don't want to come back to the classroom. When will we know whether we have enough teachers and we'll be able to fulfill all of the needs for our students at the schools if we decide to physically return to campus? Actually, even if we don't, because we have to have a student or a teacher assigned to each student.
Dr. Liberato, do you want to answer that question, please?
Sure. Ms. Reagan's, members of the board. We received the orders today, and we've scheduled a meeting with the committee and subcommittee, HR, Health and Safety, tomorrow. Lots of questions we received included a survey. So we'll talk about that tomorrow, potential questions for the survey, how it's going to inform our recommendations. And then I think I was asked a question earlier today regarding putting the survey out. Where if we, from the subcommittee perspective, and this is the personnel subcommittee, agree that the survey is needed, from the beginning, we've talked about one survey and potentially needing a second one, depending on how things change. And then we know that things change on a regular basis, especially with COVID. But we'll talk about that, and probably end of this week was my answer, earlier or early next week. We could most likely get a survey out to employees.
Okay, thank you. That will certainly help. And I just wanted to add that we can't get down to the real nitty gritty on very, very specific things that every parent has questions about for their students at their school. Because as Dr. Crumpy mentioned, ultimately those very specific details will be part of what happens at their school site and will be up to the school administrator at the school site to define those last specific details.
Right. In fact, thank you, Mrs. Reagans, for reminding me. Our principals on Wednesday, actually, and those listening will get a little bit of a heads up. And we talked about this at the task force meeting. The public health orders that came out actually require not a district-wide reopening plan, but a school-specific reopening plan. And I have noticed in responding to we're all trying hard to respond to as many individual emails as we can, that the questions are starting to get very specific, which are phenomenal. But they are best answered at the school site. And so school sites on Wednesday will be getting the task to start creating and answering the Department of Public Health requirements and mandates, along with a few of our own. And they will be the ones that will be able to discuss how do kids interclass or interschool and exit school, and where will they go if they're sick versus separating if they're ill versus they need an ice pack or a Band-Aid, and how will lunch happen and where will they eat, and all of those kinds of procedures are going to be done at the site level. And because there's nuances and differences, and we don't want to overly govern that those are decisions best made at the site. Each site will also be holding, as soon as that plan is done, their own site specific information and Q&A for the parents at their school, because once we get the decision of and start working on the master schedules and the class lists, our school sites will be the best place for a lot of those questions to get answered. We still are going to continue, and we have the Thursday information sessions that we're providing district-wide this Thursday, and we will keep providing them until we transition to the school site being able to answer a lot of those questions. Thank you, Mrs. Reagans.
Sure, thank you. So any other comments, questions, concerns
Actually,
before we take a vote? Oh, go ahead, Mrs. Liu.
Yes, thank you, President Reagans. A lot of those answers might be, a lot of those questions might be answered in the county guideline that just came out this afternoon, perhaps, that I was so impressed. Not all staff and not all of us have read it yet, but I believe Dr. Gerstland have already read that so fast. But perhaps some of those answers will be in those guidelines that we can follow.
And the Wednesday document that will be emailed to families. The parent guide to reopening schools that will also have hopefully a lot of information for families to help them out as well.
That'll be great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
More information, the better, for sure. Okay, so I have a motion and a second to adopt the distance learning model for the 2020-2021 school year. I think we're ready for a vote. All those in favor of that distance learning model, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Then how about a motion and a second for the adoption of the elementary blended learning model?
I'll move that we accept it.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded that we adopt the elementary blended learning model for the 2020-2021 school year. Notice we're not calling it hybrid. We're calling it blended, right, Dr. Crumpy?
Correct.
Trying to get our terminology down here.
Correct.
Are there any questions, concerns? We've talked about that sort of in general and had a discussion about that. All right, well, let's take a vote. All those in favor? Oh,
The only question I would have,
yeah,
Mrs. Reagan,
Mr. Gerson, go ahead.
so we approve these frameworks, but we will continue to receive regular updates on progress of the details, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, and the task force will continue their work too. It's not as though anything's being disbanded, nothing's done. This is
Nope,
just
this is
the very beginning.
One step. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just giving the framework to get the details, and then the devil's in the details, right?
yes. Yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so all those in favor of adopting the elementary blended learning model for the 2021 school year, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. We've adopted the elementary. And now for the secondary blended learning model. Can I get a motion and a
So-
second?
I
Second.
move it. So moved.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the secondary blended learning model to adopt and approve that for the 2021 school year. Any additional questions before we move on with that one? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, so go forth with those models, Dr. Crumpy, and hope that we can make it work for all of our folks in all the very different convolutions that will be put together. So now we have our consent agenda, but before we move to the consent agenda, I actually do have a statement to read about an item in the consent agenda. Please note that item 13.5 on the consent calendar provides for the approval of the agreement for the employment of the district's chief business officer, Dr. Keith Butler. The agreement is for the term from July 14th, 2020 to June 30th, 2022. Compensation will include annual salary of $216,000 and $216,015 and a doctorate degree stipend in the amount of $1,342.91 and provides for health benefits subject to applicable deductions. The employment agreement with Dr. Butler was approved as to form by the board's legal counsel. That was just meant to be a preface from our legal folks, so we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's. And with that having been said,
So he'll get paid for tonight?
No. No.
It says tomorrow.
This has been my pleasure to serve without pay tonight.
Lovely.
Thank you for pointing that out, though, Mr. Lee. We will move on to our consent agenda.
I will make a motion to approve consent items 13 through 19, all inclusive.
Okay,
I'd
I
like
do.
to pull.
Oh, go ahead.
Pull item. Pull 16.2.
Is that the same one I need? Nope. I need to pull item 13.6.
Would you pull 15.2 for me?
Okay.
15.2, and what was yours again, James?
16.2.
16.2. Okay,
Okay.
so aside
Okay.
from 13.6, 15.2,
To
and
approve everything
16.2.
13 through 19, with the exception of 16.2, 13.6, and 15.2.
Okay, yes, second. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. We have a motion to approve all consent items aside from 13.6, 15.2, and 16.2. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carried. The first one was item 13.6. That is the approval of a consultant agreement with Darlene Robles, PhD, for board governance workshops. And I believe that Dr. Stowe has a letter to read with regards to that item.
Thank you, Mrs. Reagans. This item was submitted by Julie Schenkel from the Torrance Teachers Association. She writes, these workshops are designed, and this is from the item itself, these workshops are designed to create an effective governance team relationship between the Board of Education and interim superintendent, close quotes. Why do you view $7,500 money well spent on an outside consultant to help you create a relationship with an internal candidate superintendent that you hired? Can you explain why this is a necessary cost? Thank you.
Oh, I can.
I was going to say I can. You can or you can't, Mr. Lee?
I can.
You can?
Board, so I'll let you go first.
Okay, I was just going to say that I think that that's the most responsible thing that a new leader can do is to make sure that he is on the same page as the board that he's working with, and that he's creating the norms and the protocols and the processes and the communication channels, and making sure that they are all able to work effectively to be able to govern and have a united front when working with really important issues, which all of the issues that we work with in the school district consist of. So I actually applaud Dr. Stowe for wanting to do this, and for the board members for agreeing to do it, and to work as a body to try to be the best that we can be to assist the students in Torrance. So that's my perspective, Mr. Lee. What do you have to say?
Yeah, this is really a pretty common thing in the private sector. You bring in a new CEO, you bring in any other leader, high level leader. They'll have a management team, but they'll also have a board of directors, and that's kind of more the school board is more like a board of directors as opposed to a management team. And we represent the community, much like the board of directors of a corporation will represent the shareholders. And so that relationship, I mean, Dr. Stowe is not Dr. Mannon, and Dr. Stowe is going to do things differently than Dr. Mannon. And it's important for the board to understand what his goals and objectives are. And conversely, it's really important for the superintendent to know the goals and objectives of the board. And I think $7,000 is a small price to pay for efficiency and communication and all of that going forward, and will benefit everybody in the organization and benefit everybody in the community. So thank you.
And I just wanted to add, there was a comment about it being an internal person and that we know Dr. Stowe, but in fact, we do not know Dr. Stowe as a superintendent and as our leader. And certainly in terms of academics, we know what he does on the business side of the house, but how he intends to put things together and to work with the board to be effective as a management team is not something that we are well versed on. So we all have to work out those details and make it a group effort. So once again, I think it's a great thing. Mr. Gerson.
One of the, Dr. Mannon had so much experience. When he came in, I mean, I don't know how many board members, I saw how many names there were at the bottom of that poster, but, he had an opportunity to train a lot of board members over the years. When I walked in as a board member, the previous boards had already determined how the superintendent is evaluated. And, Dr. Stowe has already, asked me, and I am not fluent in that area, and having a consultant's point of view assist me in developing that, I think is valuable for everyone who, for all students and staff who are a part of the district in helping me do a better job in what I should be doing in this role, sorry.
Thank you. I just wanted to show you all, I actually brought a board president's workshop booklet that I received at one of the last workshops I went to with CSBA. And they have a whole section about developing your, it's a board, what do they call that? The board handbook of all of the protocols and things that are important to you as a board with your superintendent, and making sure that you go through that process in a very methodical and meaningful way, so that you are prepared to move forward with the business at hand. So CSBA condones these and highly supports doing these kinds of developmental workshops. They're great people. So anybody else? Nope. Okay. Then with that said, I move to approve this item for Dr. Robles to be hired as a consultant. Is there a second? Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve Darlene Robles as a consultant for board governance workshops. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Next is 15.2.
So the question I had about this is that, so every textbook,
Yeah, we can do a motion in a second for that, please.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Can we get a motion?
Are we on 15.2 or 16.2?
15.2. He wants, we're just going to have a motion in a second to open discussion. That's actually how we're supposed to do it. I forgot to do it last time. Is there a motion?
I make a motion.
Second.
Okay. Okay, motion in a second. Go ahead, Mr. Hahn.
No, it's Mr. Gerson.
Oh, excuse me. This one's Mr. Gerson. Sorry.
That's my fault.
So on the call with CIF and the executive director, I had heard that this might be coming, and this is that allows the district to offer student athletes a 30-day waiver if they believe that they, if they're having trouble getting into their pediatrician for a physical. And as long as they've had a previous physical or a previous check, child check, then the district is allowed to waive for 30 days and allow them to attend practice. But I have a lot of questions related to that. I don't, CIF is still up in the air about what fall sports might look like. Universities, the Pac-12 is going to have, football only within the Pac-12, no external games. But we know that other seasons have been canceled due to the fall. And so I was just wondering, I don't know if Dr. Egan or Dr. Stowe wants to respond, what fall might look like, if this is something that is valuable to us. Is this something we should be doing? That this was offered as an option if districts wanted to do it. But I know CIF isn't asking districts to do it. It's just being an option. And in addition, all of the pediatricians that I've talked to, they really don't have a problem with seeing people right now. Like they all have slots, but if one of you could respond, is this something that we need to do? And is this something that we're actually going to be using? Will we have fall athletics?
So I'll go ahead and speak to that. And thank you, Mr. Gerson, for the question. I think, Dr. Gerson, I'm sorry. I think it, parent spinner, right? We got to remember that for each other. But I do think this is an important point of clarification for our community that are paying attention on this evening. I do believe it's an important thing for us to do. It does put in place an option that CIF has made available to folks. I don't know that everybody's situation in terms of access to their medical provider may be the same. It certainly could be something that's maybe burdensome from the family side of things in terms of paying a copay or getting to an appointment or whatnot. So we're just asking for this as an option for the board, with the board's authorization to allow this so that if parents and families need this, should we have athletics, we've made that decision to put that in place as CIF has guided us to do to get board consent. With regards to your question of what will the fall in sports look like, CIF has given a hard deadline of July 20th as to when they'll make their own statement as to what they'll support in terms of athletics in the fall, and then ultimately, the decisions to participate in any sports, if they even recommend any, which they may. There are several that fall into a category that they determine as no contact. It is possible. As you mentioned previously, we don't know what things will look like in a few weeks, and everything changes, in terms of those conditions. So with that, we think that this is an important thing to improve, to have in place for families should they need it, so that if we're able to allow practice, or at least conditioning activities in anticipation of practice and ultimately contests, families can get their child prepared by signing this form in advance of being able to get the actual physical.
One more question on this topic, if you would please.
Sure.
Our principals and perhaps other principals in the South Bay, what do we have a position, or is a position being developed should Orange County allow and LA County not allow complete, athletics to happen? Does our county, part of Southern Section, are we going to have a response?
Well, our school district has 4 schools who participate as members of the South Bay Athletic Association, which actually is 18 local schools that makes up the 3 leagues that our schools all participate in. So we would likely be working in partnership with those entities to then be able to bring an informed position to you guys, to our board and cabinet, to further dialogue about what's best for Torrance, whether it be limited sports that are being recommended, no sports, or many sports. We would seek some counsel that way, in addition to what CIF and the Southern Section, which is what we participate in, would offer as information for us to consider.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to add that the families I've heard from that might avail themselves of this, it's not that they weren't able to get appointments, but they were choosing not to because of the situation with COVID. They did not want to go to a doctor's office at this point in time. I'm hoping that it would be different in a month or two. So I think it's a great option anyway, at least to have. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve item 15.2, which is for TUSD to offer a 30-day physical exam waiver to the 2020 fall season athletes. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. And last but not least, now Mr. Hahn for the 16.2.
I just have a quick question. Usually on textbook
Motion and second.
adoptions. Oh, motion and second.
I'll make
Okay.
the motion.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Okay.
It's like options. We have the opportunity to talk to the committee that adopted the textbooks, correct? But this time we're not given that opportunity. And so, am I misunderstanding?
So you're right, Mr. Hahn. When we do a major adoption, like we did a year ago with history, social studies, and this year with science, we come forward and bring the committee forward with a presentation for you. But quite often we also have one-offs, I'm going to call them, where we have textbook selections and adoption recommendations that are not within the cycle. AP class courses are one of those exceptions. We don't often have that. They're not within the same timeline, and they're often really governed by the College Board and their change in syllabi. And so a number of years ago, it's been a long time, we actually have to have all of our syllabi approved by the College Board by each teacher that teaches those courses. They have to be uploaded and then approved before kids can get credit for them. and that it requires the right book or books, that sometimes they give us a choice and sometimes not. So this was a very small committee of just those special AP teachers that unanimously reviewed the selection and brought that forward.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know when they last did an adoption, Katie?
I don't know the AP. I would have to get back to you, but when we did the history social studies a year ago, it had been like 18 years or
Yeah,
something.
I was thinking the same maybe for these guys.
And because they had missed for history social studies, they had missed the prior adoption because it was during the recession when we were not adopting text, and it was very, very, very old. And so I think this is forthcoming. And then just in foreshadowing, when we did our science adoption, we also had a few curricular areas, including AP or subject areas, sorry, including AP sciences, that some were not ready to make their decision, and some are awaiting College Board. So there may be some cleanup board items in the year coming for some of those science adoptions as well.
Okay, sounds good. So we have a motion and a second to approve the AP Government and AP Econ textbook adoptions for 2020. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. We are getting down to the end of our agenda. There is a board calendar, such as it is for the coming months. And there are revisions to the administrative regulations that go along with the board policy revisions that we made earlier in the meeting, and the Williams reporting requirements. So please check those out on our agenda. And we have comments perhaps from members of the Board of Education. Mr. Hahn, is there anything from SoCal Rock that we need to hear?
No, we have our meeting in a couple of weeks, so we have not had a board meeting since that last meeting.
Okay, I did notice in the budget trailer bill that the last $1 million to be allocated to SoCal Rock was there.
Yes. So a little bit better than nothing.
Yeah, that's something to say. Are there comments from other board members before we finish off this evening?
Yeah, I have a little something since you mentioned also, along with all the working on the school reopening plans. We also held legislative meetings with Assemblyman Al Morasucci and State Senator Ben Allen a while ago to fight for funding actually for our schools. Just want the public to know that while we're all working very hard on reopening schools, we're also on the other side, since we have this huge budget problem, that we are also working on that. Dr. Gerson, as my fellow co-chair of the legislative committee here on our board, attended the meeting, and we invited the school board members from our neighboring school districts, such as Palos Verdes Peninsula, Redondo Beach, Manhattan Beach, Hermosa Beach, and El Segundo. And I want to just, the meeting was very productive, and I just want to publicly thank the two legislators and our neighboring South Bay school board members for attending and participating, and that the fight is still going on while all this COVID-19 thing is still going on. We're still fighting for our funding. So that's it, President Reagans.
Thank you. Dr. Gerson or Mr. Hahn, anything? Mr. Lee, one last moment. All right, then I will.
So just to encourage, first of all, again, I want to thank everyone that came on to the task force meeting, board meeting, workshop, all the people that are involved. It's been great to see the community engagement. I just want to, again, maybe Dr. Crumpy, if I misstate this, please correct me. But I think that, again, to help people make the decision about, for your decision, whether or not to go blended or to go distance learning. If there's any inkling that you desire for your kid to come back at any moment, they should sign up for the blended learning option. Yes, Dr. Crumpy? Any inkling? Yes.
Well, I mean, it's a personal, it's a family decision, and what works for them. But
if there's any desire, any inkling, any desire to have them come back ever, that they should go over the blended learning option. If they have no desire, then there should be definitely the distance learning option.
Yes.
So I wanted to kind of help inform the parents, so that when you're making that decision, just so that you have a clear understanding, just to help everyone that is out there. And this last thing I want to say, I really want to, I don't know how to say this, but obviously today we had some news regarding the decisions of certain school districts, whatever it may be, and our Governor Newsom. And I was very disappointed today that we decided to close indoor businesses, church meetings, and indoor restaurants. Anything indoor seemed like today was canceled. It was shut down. But I think there was one glaring thing that he did not mention to shut down. That's indoor schools. And I think what's unfortunate is that this issue has now no longer become a scientific issue to me. It's become a politicized issue. And I think that's unfortunate, whether it's from Trump, whether it's from Newsom. And I think that it would have been helpful today if Dr. Farrar and the LA County Public Health gave us a strong directive, but they did not. If you look at that directive, to be honest, it was not really helpful. And I felt like they have evaded the responsibility of taking ownership of this health crisis for schools. And they left it into our laps, where I am not a doctor, I am not a scientist, I'm just a pastor. And yet I'm gonna have to make a decision on the schools of reopening or closing schools based upon a science fact that I am not a scientist or a doctor, because they do not want to make that directive. Even though they made the directive to shut down churches, shut down restaurants, shut down these other institutions, if it's so dangerous in these indoor environments, then why not schools? It's because they don't want that responsibility. And I wish that they would have given us a stronger directive. That's my only take on this. And I just implore that our leadership in our state to be stronger in their direction and their leadership and their guidance for all of us, whether it be LA County Public Health, whether it be the Governor Newsom. We rely upon your direction and your wisdom in all these matters. And second of all, we talk about the safety for our teachers, and a lot of the conversation is about they won't feel safe at our schools. I just want to put it out there. I really implore Congress to fund our schools, to fund so that our teachers can feel safe. I know July there's going to be some kind of bill, and my hope is that you guys would do what it takes so that we would have the equipment that is necessary so that our teachers and our kids can be safe when or if they return back to school. I think at a time like this, we really need our congressional leaders, our state leaders to really guide us and help us when we make these decisions. And so that's just one of the things that I really want to express to all of you out there today. So thank you for your time.
Yes, Dr. Gerson.
I agree with my colleague, Mr. Hahn, that I'm frustrated that it's been politicized. We have some of our higher government telling us you must open, and some of our government telling us you must close, and that is frustrating. On the flip side, now that I've had a few chances to talk to Dr. Ferrer, she is truly an impressive person. She is super intelligent, and has helped me understand the different types of environments, schools being a moderate risk environment, what that means, how you protect people as best you can, and understanding that because it's such a complex issue between, you can't stay home forever. The economy must be able to fund and keep us afloat. And at the same time, we must protect health and life to the best of our ability. And it is such a hard balance. And I appreciate the language that they use is so carefully thought out. We are so fortunate to live in Torrance and live in the South Bay, that in a town of almost 150,000, we're still below 800 people who have tested positive. And it's a little scary. I've been told that the Torrance Memorial has jumped from 13 COVID patients to 50 in the matter of like a week. And that is of great concern. but by giving the freedom for us, and we do have such a great partnership with Torrance Memorial and Providence Little Company, that we are able to make local decisions, and that we can make those local decisions quickly, because Cabinet has really shown their ability. When it was time to close, they were patient but methodical and quick when they needed to be. And I know they can do that again for our community, so that we can make a good decision to open and close, and that they leave a little bit of local control for us, rather than dictating to us, because Torrance is not the same as all of LA County, even though we are linked. And so I do appreciate a little bit of that freedom, and I do thank them for that. So I agree with some and disagree with some, but thank you, Mr. Hahn.
Thank you for your comments. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you for your time and attention, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Good night.